I know, right? Wasn't that crazy? Dude. Oh, what's good, y'all? How we doing? I'm Jonathan Stein. I just got back from the beach. And you know what that got me in the mood for? Some wavetable. So today's video gonna be all about wavetable. So let's get to it. Let's take a look, shall we? Yeah. All right, let me just get settled in. Yeah, get that lumbar all locked in. Don't need this now that I'm all dried off. Take these ridiculous things off so that I can see what's going on. Let's take a look. Here's the darn thing down here, wavetable. Some of y'all have probably gotten a chance to already play with this thing, but I'm gonna show you everything that I like to do with this very, very cool, tasty, powerful synth. So first things first, just hit this little triangle here, and boom, wavetable expands into this lovely full screen visual immersive experience. So let's break it down. Let's start with the primary new thing here. The thing that makes this thing called wavetable is, like its predecessors, Serum and maybe Massive that came before it, wavetable is all about these wavetable matrices. Instead of dealing with single separate waveforms, you're dealing with spectrums of waveforms that can be morphed and adjusted very fluidly to kind of morph the sound. You'll see what I mean. So wavetable has two individual oscillators, each that could have its own wavetable. And this is what I just opened up here. This is the default wavetable that happens when you first purchase Live Suite or whatever and click wavetable. This is what comes out. So we're going to start from there and build from scratch. So by default, they give you one oscillator open. And this first table matrix is under the tab Basic. There's all these broad categories and all these subcategories here. And this first one is actually very practical because this first table matrix takes you from a basic sine wave. This style here will allow you to morph the waveform. Now, you may notice I don't even have the push set up on the table today, and that is because I want to make a point of showing how to use wavetable purely with just the computer and the keyboard. Maybe I'll do a whole nother vid where I talk about controlling wavetable with push, which is a whole nother thing and super fun to do. More on that later. So instead, I'm going to be playing keys on my QWERTY keyboard here. And in order to turn that on, you go to the top right of Ableton and click the keyboard. And with just a little bit of practice, you'll learn how to play keys on this. It's not super practical, but it'll definitely get the job done here. So, right off the bat, we've got a very standard sounding sine wave, and let's all just admit it that sine waves are amazing. We all love sine waves. They're pure, they're fundamental. They make up about 95% of all subs ever made. So this is a great start. And watch what happens when you slide the wave position up. So it travels from sine to triangle, which is an interesting kind of compromise. You still get a lot of that fundamental and just a bit of brightness. You make great subs with triangle waves. And now we're up to saw wave, where you get that crazy buzzy brilliance of all overtones. And up here, square wave. And the cool thing about this wavetable approach is you could get right in the middle and get these interesting hybrids. Like these positions here. And the visual will always show you that. By the way, here's a quick little fun one. You can actually choose between the horizontal wave display or these strange spheres that show the waves. Kind of cool, depending on what you're into visually. They both help. So let's scroll through these other waveforms. Let's just look through the basics and see what happens. With each of these, you kind of just want to manually play with the position, kind of just feel out the range of what it can do. So this one seems to be all about emphasizing harmonics as you go up. That seems to morph to some sort of pulse wave that I actually liked. It was very pretty. Cool. Yeah, these sound great. They also just look awesome. I mean, goddamn, look at this freaking mathematical art here. All right, let's go to a bigger tab because you kind of see what's going on with the basics. Collection has some particular ones. There's nice stuff going on here. That one's not my fave. That's cool. got some good stuff. Seems to be like a full square down here. And that's like a 2-octave saw. All right. Ooh, yeah, now we're going to like a freaking Michael Bay Transformers 6 sound design team stuff here. Sick. Graphite. They all have cool names too. This one seems very noisy. After you spend some time playing with these waveforms, you'll start to see patterns with how they look and how they sound. So if they're very chattery like this, they're going to be very bright and very noisy. Like, I don't know what you could possibly do with that to make it sound good. Nope. Maybe that. Something like this is kind of more what I'm into, this territory here. These kind of cool, bizarre, halfway, undeterminate waveform sounds that still have a nice foundation and you can make good stuff with. And as you can see, there's tons of subcategories and hundreds of waveforms. Honestly, enough waveforms to play with for a lifetime. Don't get caught up in that. The waveform is actually pretty interchangeable, so we're going to get back to that. I just wanted to give you an intro of how that works, and I'm going to go ahead and return to a simple sine wave and move on to one of the most important parts of synthesis, which is the filter. The reason that is with synthesis, you're dealing with waveforms and frequencies that have too much. They're too bright, they're too full. So you want to subtract, you want to take away the bits and frequencies that you don't want to get the final sound you want. And you do that mostly with the filter. And a great way to do that with the filter and achieve that thick, fuzzy, saturated, complex, humanized, analog, if you will, tone that we desire and yearn and long for and reminisce about, and all those old, crazy 80s Cyndi Lauper recordings with those insane big reverb synths, is the way those hardware synths filters were saturated. And Ableton introduced these emulations a couple years ago, actually, and a lot of their devices, such as Operator, Simpler, maybe Sampler, and Wavetable, lets you play with these classic filter emulators. So we've got 4 options here. Instead of just doing clean, which I actually find kind of boring at this point, you got the OSR, the MS2, the SMP, the PRD. Now apparently all of these refer to specific classic synths. If you know what those are, please educate your boy in the comments below, because I have no idea. But I know what they sound like, and they all sound pretty different, and they're fun to play with. So let's just kind of give a quick tour of these. Let's start with the OSR. Now the best way to test what these sound like is to introduce an extreme amount of filter drive. This is where the tonal stuff starts to happen. Right off the bat, nothing. Okay, here we go. So interesting, up to about 12 decibels. The sound is delicately saturated. And then we get a true drive tone. And now we're all the way here. Cool. And let's hear how the MS2 sounds in comparison. Alright, seemingly no different, but we'll explore that in a sec. Maybe a tiny bit darker. The PRD is exceptionally different sounding. Let's try it on a lower register. By the way, to change octaves when you're doing this keyboard thing, use Z and X to move up and down octaves. So I'm gonna hit Z. Oh yeah, now we're down in that zone. Oh, I like it. So how are we really gonna explore the difference between how these filters sound? Well, let's go ahead and jump ahead to playing with some of these envelopes. We're going to get back to that filter in a sec. So Wavetable proposes to you 3 envelopes. One is solely the amplitude envelope. And this is a beautiful, beautiful approach that Wavetable has that contrasts how you play with Operator. By the way, those of y'all who are longtime Jay Stein fans know that I love Operator and have a super personal, intimate history with it. And I've made many, many, many a song with it. And best believe I'm gonna do a video on Operator too, because they could do some amazing, powerful things. These synths are different. They are meant to contrast and complete one another. One of the ways Wavetable does that is it has its own amplitude envelope. Now those of y'all that know about envelopes, it has to do with the shape of a sound from start, when you push the key down or put that MIDI note in the piano roll, to when that MIDI note ends. So giving it a soft attack, like such, we'll give it a very vowel-like vroom vroom sound. This is stuff we've talked about before, but always good to review. The sustain is the resting point. So watch what happens if I get rid of the sustain. It fades to nothing, and it fades to nothing over the period of 600 milliseconds, the decay. And likewise, if I were to just play the note very quickly and release my finger, it takes 600 milliseconds for that note to disappear upon me releasing. So adjusting these parameters will let you to get any type of shape to your sound. That's just the amplitude envelope. You also have these two that are just fair game to route to anything. And now we're going to introduce the matrix of Wavetable, which is this insane Microsoft Excel spreadsheet grid down here. So on the x-axis, you have things that we've been talking about, like the amplitude envelope, and then these two envelopes right here. Two LFOs, which we'll get to in a sec, and all the greens are stuff having to do with MIDI control, for example, velocity. So that means that if you were playing on a MIDI controller with velocity sensitivity, which this doesn't have, but so be it, the amplitude, the overall volume, is going to be affected by how hard you press. That's very, very standard. Most instruments have that. It creates a realism to the synth. We're going to keep it for now. Doesn't really matter. Assigning things to the note means that depending on the lowness or highness of the note, different parameters will be affected here. Pitch band, that's the pitch band. Right now, by default, it has a range of 2 half steps. That's the one you want, honestly. Aftertouch, that is when you push down on a key after you've initially pushed. And that's fun to route certain things to. Modulation wheel, looks like by default, they give you full blast to the oscillator position. That's what we were exploring up here. So that could be good if you have a MIDI controller with a modulation wheel that allows you to just scroll through these. That could be fun. And random. Yeah, I have no idea what random is. That's another one I'll let y'all school me on. So what we want to do is bring this second envelope into use. And I'm going to roll the sustain down. I want it to go all the way back down to 0. By the way, you'll see that these envelopes are also broken down into 3 categories. There's the value, which has to do with the peak positions of these 4 points, the initial, the peak, the sustain, and the release. The slope is fun to play with. That's the graduation of these changes. I'm going to leave that as default. I'll let you mess with that on your own. And the time is kind of the most important one, but that's the length of time between these events. So what I want to do is assign the filter frequency, which I'm now going to drop all the way down to 0. I'm going to make the attack pretty quick again, so it's more of like a classic sub. You'll notice that you don't want the attack to be too instant, because then you'll get this kind of annoying bite. It's kind of a sweet spot. It's like a few milliseconds. Every time I stumble upon a sound that I like, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate it in my little sesh and put it aside. So we're just creating sounds as we go. I'm going to call it sub. We'll all know what that means. And now we'll go back where we are and make the next sound. And kind of what I want to show through doing this is the beauty of synthesis is every sound is just one little tweak away from a new sound. We're just going to go through and travel forward and let one sound, cool sound, naturally evolve and develop to the next. So here we go. Let's make our second one. What are some things we can do different? Let's make the attack soft again. And let's introduce the second envelope. So I'm going to roll this down to 0. And what I want to do is get to know this filter, the sound of these filters a little better. So I'm going to roll down the filter frequency all the way to 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to route envelope 2 to the filter. And by the way Wavetable works is anything, and I mean anything, can be routed to anything down here. So if I'm clicking around on random stuff like the release or the sustain or, I don't know, I mean just random stuff, the LFO 1 amount, oscillator 1 position, we'll get to that in a sec, that parameter appears in the table matrix ready for you to assign to something. So if I click on frequency, boom, it appears down here, right where it wants to be. Now I go to envelope 2, and I'm just going to go ahead and route that full, 100%. It's good to start at 100, then you could wean it down from there. Okay, so now what's happening is, over the period of this envelope here, which is pretty much no attack, 6 seconds of decay, the filter is going from full blast and slowly settling back down to 20 hertz, creating that classic 2010 dubstep wub-wub sound. Don't worry, we'll step it up from here. Although it is cool. And this is actually a great way to hear what these filters actually do, especially if you turn the resonance all the way up, which actually sounds very musical when you have the drive up at 24 dB all the way. So now you hear the full sweep of what this filter does. Let's just play. Cool, nice. So now you really see what's going on with this filter, what it's capable of doing. Moving on, let's try the SMP. Sweet. Yeah, these are fun. Huh, this one seems to be more subtle, more passive. Cool. All right, that's just a good introduction of how to play with these and figure out what they sound like. Now I'm going to just say that's a little too extreme, so I'm just going to take the resonance down, and we'll get back to that later. Now why don't we go ahead and adjust our waveform a bit. Let's try something like the saw, so we just have more brilliance, more frequencies to play with. Okay, cool. Try more resonance, try a different filter type. Wow, that's extreme. Cool, there we go, that sounds good. Nice, maybe we'll make the attack a little softer so it's just more valley. Awesome. Cool, what about the square wave? Somewhere in the middle of the two so we can get a tiny bit of square wave blend in there. Alright, so why don't we go ahead and introduce this second oscillator now, kind of like what you would do with operator, blending multiple oscillators. And let's just keep it simple. Maybe this one will be more in the square wave position. And for these to really kind of stand out from one another, let's go ahead and detune this new one. Just up a few nudges. Cool. Yeah, this is something I love to do with my synths. If I'm dealing with multiple oscillators, I just love detuning them all subtly so that you get that rub, that friction. I love that friction. So this is cool. What if we did the octave thing? So there's also a half step adjustment here. I think if you hit shift and up, you could just go up a full octave. Cool, I like where this is going. I'm gonna make both of them more saw wavy, because those blend very well in octaves. Yeah, sick. I like where this is going. And check this out. Wavetable also has kind of a secret, not so secret, third oscillator. If you turn this on, now you've got a sub that by default will sound an octave below. You could also make it be unison or 2 octaves below. And this will allow us to have a third oscillator, essentially. Hell yeah, now we got that sick-ass triple octave synth. Now if we go ahead and just turn off oscillator 2 and 1, we can take a look at what sub is actually doing by itself. So by default, it is set to be just a sine wave, and you notice that it's going through the same filter drive and saturation. As you roll the tone knob up, it gradually morphs to being a saw wave. Watch. So if we wanted to truly have a triple saw scenario here, then we would turn that up to 100% and turn these back on. And maybe now I'll just make this one a little sharper and this one a little more sharper. I did them all 3 cents apart. You know, something you could play with, see what you like. Wow, so sick. And so simple too. We haven't even gotten into these other things yet. So now I'm playing around and making it more out of tune. Yeah, I like that a lot. Sick. Cool. What do you guys think? Should we save this sound and move on to the next? I think so. I'm happy. So we're going to call that, I'm going to double this and call this new one Triple Saw. Now let's jump back in and make another sound, something else cool. So at this time, we get a little more creative with the filter envelope, maybe give it a slower tack. And now we're going to introduce the unison unison section. So by default, it's just going to give you a single sounding of your oscillator choices right in the center to get that classic sound. By the way, that being said, you could also manually pan these two oscillators. So I could go ahead and put this one on the left and that one on the right, which is actually extremely cool. I'm just going to tone that back a bit, maybe 10 left, 10 right. And now I'm going to turn the unison on, and let's just do that same experimentation and play with all 6 of these options. Okay, now stuff is happening. Sick. So this one's called Classic, and it's just a very standard detune. The voices knob here will determine how many times the sound is duplicated and panned across the left and right spectrum. That's just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As you go higher, it's going to get messier and more blurred and fuller, really. And the amount is the amount of detuning. 30 seems to be a good sweet spot. But you could go up from there and get very extreme, wide, big sounds. Sometimes you got to find the right combination of voices and amount. That's not working for me. That's working for me. Moving on, shimmer. Shimmer seems to be a slightly different type of detuning. I'm no expert on what the difference is, so I'll let you play with that on your own. Noise happens to be one of my favorites. It has a very pleasingly subtle way of detuning. And it also adds this very chattery noise thing, which I love. Y'all know I love my noise. So this one really hits the spot for me. You get really beautiful tones with it. Phase sync. So this is a displacement of the signal. Not detuning it, but just phasing it out of sync. Those of y'all that are familiar with phase, it's a bizarre sound. But there's good stuff to be done with this one here, especially at the higher voice and amount values. Cool, I actually like this a lot. Position spread. This is interesting. This will spread the placement of the oscillators up and down from where you start. So you end up with a more complex wave type. So it's kind of polygamous wave type. Polywaveable? Yeah, polywaveable. We'll work with that. And lastly, random note. I'm guessing that is a combination of subtle displacement and subtle detuning. The point is, all 6 of these options have slightly different effects. Play with them as you will and find what you like. I'm gonna go back to that phase sync. I really like what was happening there. Like around here. Cool, nice. So this has become a whole nother sound, suddenly. And let's go ahead and introduce one more cool parameter to all of this. We're gonna introduce an LFO, and we're gonna route LFO1 to the pitch. So we do some basic grid work here. LFO1 and pitch intersect here. Now I'm gonna make the value low because we don't want too much wobble. I think each one of these represents a half step. So what if we just made that 1 half step? That way we don't have to go too ham readjusting this. Okay, as expected, it's gonna make the pitch womp up and down. So we wanna get a fast vibrato thing. So we wanna make the rate quite fast. Cool, and maybe we'll just turn down the amount here until it's usable, like that. Kind of sounds like an opera singer who's just like, wah. You could even give your LFO a slow attack right here. Now check this out. Ooh, you could even visually see it happening, which means that over the period of 800 or so milliseconds, 900, it's going to go from no LFO, no vibrato, to having vibrato, which is something I also really like to do, and also reflects how a human being might sing. You notice you listen to a good singer, they'll start with a pure note, and then add the vibrato. Yeah. See, this is that subtle, slick shit that will make your synths go next level. Cool. So I'm going to save this. It's very pretty. We're going to call it Saw Phase Pad. And those of y'all who know me know that I don't have time for vowels. And what we're gonna do now, since we're making some headway, we've got 3 synths. Ooh, why don't we just go ahead and change their colors? Just make that color. Yeah, nice. And let's just draw some MIDI. Let's kind of like make a song, kind of like an all synth-based song of all this. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit Command-Shift-N, and that will create a MIDI clip based on what I had selected in the timeline. Hit Command-2 a few times, narrow the grid down to, I guess, 16ths. I'm just gonna draw a silly bass line. Might be a good time to have the pencil tool on. And then you could also hit Shift right arrow to lengthen notes. This is a very nice way to draw melodies in without actually really using the mouse much at all. That was just me hitting the down arrow key and the right arrow key to lengthen it. Okay, that sounds very poppy by itself, but we'll justify it. I'm just gonna slow down the tempo so that it's my type of wave. And one thing that we skipped over too quickly is poly versus mono. So whenever I'm working with bass sounds or just melodic leads in general, where you want to have things like glide happening or don't want overlap of notes, particularly in low registers like this, then I hit this toggle here, boom. It switches to become mono, and each note passes to the next very cleanly. Cool, that sounds to me like a bass line. Now I'm just gonna be very lazy, like all producers, and copy this clip up here to my triple saw. Okay. Now the problem here is this sound is actually an octave lower because we have this -1 here. Hence why it's crazy muddy. So I'm just gonna take the clip, take up the octave. There we go. And let's just see how these blend together. It's fun to layer multiple types of bass synths to get fuller sounds like this. Turn it down a bit. Dope, I like that. Maybe nudge the tempo down just a bit more. And let's take that same clip, copy it up here now. Cool. But don't you worry, I'm not just gonna put another freaking big ass bright saw synth up here. Let's get some chords involved. Filling a couple notes. I'm gonna let you come up with your own chords here. Don't try and, no need to get too focused on what's going on here, but let's see where we're at. Sick. Cool, I love what the phaser's doing on this one. Kind of working together with this big filter frequency automation. Let's hear all 3 of these together. Beautiful. Wow, cool. So now we're just gonna keep going, do that same process again, and make another type of synth. So I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this one we just made, and let's make this turn into something else too. Maybe something that's kind of more of like a nice melodic lead. So we're gonna turn mono on, and now I'd like to introduce glide. I'm also gonna go up to a higher melodic register, hit X a couple times. Cool, so some things right off the bat is I'm going to bring the sustain back. We're going to do that -6 thing, so it just has a bit of bite. And then I'll make the decay very short. More that type of thing. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have just a bit of filter usage, but I'm going to have it settle where I want the sound to rest. So I'm going to turn this down. Or maybe I'll keep this at 100 and just go to the value here. Cool, so it just has a little bit of articulation. Now I'm gonna try a different type of unison, maybe like the noise one. And maybe I'll go back a few steps. I'll just go back to 1 oscillator. That's all you really need. Try one of these weirder oscillators. Something like this. Cool, yeah, just find one that you like. So now, we get a new clip in here. I'm just gonna draw something in. And I'm gonna make my bass. There we go. Wow, crazy 2014 bass right now. This kind of stuff right here. Now, if you want to activate glide, you need these things to overlap. So the notes that I want to have the glide, I'm making sure they overlap like such. Yeah. And maybe we bring back one of those other oscillators. So maybe we just take everything down the octave. Cool, I like that. And a little less lazy on the attack. Oh, cool. I like that. Hell yeah. Man, get Comtrues to cosign on this. Alright, so we're going to call that Moog. I know it's Moog. God. Moog-esque. Change the color. Alright, this brings us to a fun little arrival point where now we're going to make some dirty, crazy sounds using the full power of these wavetable matrices. So what we're going to do now is we're going to assign envelope 3 to the oscillator position right here. So click on the oscillator position. I'm just going to turn off these other oscillators. One will be enough for this, trust me. And by clicking on that, it appears right here. Oh, it was already here. Envelope 3. Roll it up full percent. And now what happens is the oscillator position follows what you have here. I'm also just going to bring the filter frequency up. Cool. I'm going to go back to the bass register too. Yeah, this sound. Cool, there's not too much happening there. I'm just going to go ahead and skip ahead to collection. Oh yeah, now we're going to get into some interesting stuff. Wow, cool. Alright, what if we give the envelope a slow attack so it goes up then down? Nice. Yeah. Decepticons for days. Wow. This is always fun to do. Forgot about this. Rust. Wow, Rust. Ooh. Hell yeah. Let's try a more extreme unison setting. Ooh. Awesome. Slate. Wow. Squash. Dark. So much awesome stuff here. Ooh. This one's cool. Cool. And if you wanted to reinforce that with just a sub, so yeah, you get more fundamental, you can turn this on. I'm gonna have it be unison, turn the tone down. Let the gain be at unity. So now you get a strong fundamental on top of this crazy stuff. Ooh. And every time I do this, I remember how cool this thing is. Cool, let's just pick any of these. I mean, you get the idea. They all can be extremely awesome. And why don't we go ahead and introduce the second filter, another thing unique to Wavetable. Boom. And with this one, you could have them both be doing different types of things. The default setting is serial, where one filter routes into the next. I'm just going to use this second filter, put another type of one of these filter drives on. I'm not going to be too specific about it. And I'm just going to use this to make more extreme things happen to the tone, more saturation. I'm also going to make it low pass. I'm going to add drive. Okay. Yeah, it's just too much drive. Oh wow. There we go. And just a little bit of drive on the second one because I want to preserve all those cool details of the waveform. This is a savage sound. Ooh. Cool, now I'm going to have the filter frequency of the second filter be routed to envelope 2. And so now what's happening is after a long period of time, the filter cutoff rolls down and it kind of darkens and disappears from that. So I love this sound. It is very badass. We're going to call it bzzz. Sometimes I just like to use onomatopoeia when I'm naming my sounds. And for this one, Let's see what happens. I'm just going to put it as its own section over here. Maybe why not layer it with our original sub. Cool, awesome. Now the last thing we could do, let's go ahead and duplicate that. Despite these waveforms already being very insane, you can also manipulate them even further with these parameters over here. Let's try just playing with FM. First thing you're gonna do is introduce the amount and watch what happens. Whoa, trippy, so trippy. Oh my God, so trippy, what a mindfuck. And now, the waveform's been folded and exponentialized or logarithmized. Math people, please tell me what's happening here. And you can just see it's insane. And then you can also adjust the tune, which seems to maybe raise it up by an octave in terms of the overtone position. It is also classic. Oh my. And this makes it turn into some sort of weird pulse width. Very interesting. And there's something called modern. Wow, this is just mesmerizing to look at. Let's try this with another waveform. Oh my God. Alright, so this is my observation of these. When you go ham with this effect here, you're going to get the best results with a simpler starting waveform. There we go. So that you have some room to work with as it gets brighter. Like, that's sick. I like that sound. Let's try with a different unison. Savage. Maybe not quite that one. Or none. No, I actually do like it with some. Let's go ahead and call that another sound too. And we'll just set that up over here. And you just kind of continue like this. And the beauty of this type of synthesis, or just synthesizers and sound design in general, is, like I said, every sound is one click away from an entirely different sound. Well, let's try and make a point of that. What if we went back to this pad here that we made, this cool pad? I'm just going to duplicate it, focus on it for a sec. What if instead I made both these waveforms just way different? Way different. What if I changed the filter type to bandpass? Just lowered the position. Change the unison. That's cool. It's a whole nother thing now. What if I made it stabby? Took away the vowel aspect of it. Cool, we'll call that BP for bandpass. And maybe we'll just introduce it to a new section of our little all synth song. Why not? So let's just listen to what we got here all together. I don't know if this is going to sound like much. Probably not. I'll move these over here, get rid of this. Boom. Oof. I love that. Make that happen again. Now we have this insane breakdown. Sick. Dope. Another flavor. One of many to make. Oh, this one's more like hollow. It's cool though. Let's finish it off with one more of these. Woo! Sadness. There you go. That's an in-depth look at things I like to do with Wavetable. This amazing, amazing, cool, fun, powerful synth. Have fun with this bad boy. Remember, it's a lot. Even if you were to strategically do everything I just showed you, you won't be able to get through all of it. And it's honestly more fun to just build up comfortability and confidence to just explore these parameters, and honestly all the ones I didn't show you, just on your own and see what happens. Just be open to stumbling on things. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I'm Jonathan Stein. I have a lot of fun doing these vids. Like always, send any feedback and comments. You can download this project with all these sounds I made in it below. Much love, y'all. Stay Swess.